Hey kids, howdy, and welcome once again to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology, and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. It is the week of August 24th through the 30th. Last week of the month, we are smack dab in the middle of eclipse season, kids, and I don't mind telling you, this has been a rough time. Social media commentary is so valuable for me to check into what people are vibing in and experiencing. And there's been so much consistency of lots of lacking of sleep, lots of deep feelings. When we're in an eclipse wormhole, the idea is that everything just amplifies up a few notches. And so the things that happen, like transits that occur on like a Tuesday that are between the personal planets or, the personal planet hitting one of the outer planets, it's something that's like passing with maybe a reflection of 2 or 3 days worth of energy, just by virtue of it being inside of an eclipse, everything is just more so. And so that's why day to day in eclipse season, the little bits of traffic that we bump into here and there have a lot of extra feels. And this is the week of the full moon. So got our lunar eclipse coming up. But first, let's do a quick announcement and then a question that I got. I love this that came in about Venus retrograde because Saturday is the webinar. So that's the 29th on, I think it's, I don't have my calendar in front of me, but it's 11 a.m. I expect it to go 2 hours or under. And you can just head over to michaellennox.com to get your seat if you haven't registered. But I did get this message from Marcy wrote in. She says, "Hey, Michael and Zoe, I'm so nervous about Venus going retrograde. I've heard so much online that says do not start a relationship now, that they'll fall apart or that exes come back and ruin things. I just started dating someone for the first time in a long time and it's actually feeling really good. But I'm sort of nervous about Venus going retrograde because of all I've heard. I signed up for your webinar, but I also, that's why thank you, Marcy. I signed up for your webinar, but I also wanted to write in and see if by some miracle you would see this and read it on your podcast. Please help me calm down. Thank you, Marcy." Well, indeed, I think I can help you calm down because it's not that these ideas are not possible and not so. There is a shift when a personal planet is retrograde that we feel in a big way. So just as there's a sense of the challenges of Mercury retrograde, everybody's familiar with them. They're well known. And Mercury, thinking, perception, we bump into the furniture is my dad joke about if our perception mechanism is turned within, then we can't see where we're going, so we trip up a lot. So if the love mechanism is turned within, there can be an experience of connection and intimacy that is a reflection of the atmosphere at the time that, say, Venus is retrograde. That is a thing. It's an imprint that is different than if Venus is direct. So the idea would be, okay, Venus is backwards on a Tuesday. You meet somebody in that Tuesday moment and you start a connection. The Venus retrograde, I'm not going to say what impact or influence it has because that's nonsense. Astrology can't say that. The impact will be different from person to person, heart to heart. But the concept is there. The archetype structure is there, that love will be turned within on some level so that when Venus goes out of retrograde and the atmosphere is now changed because there's a direct energy that we're reflecting Venus's orbit with, the energy changes, the love sort of emerges from the unconscious. You look across the room and the trope is that it'd be like, this won't feel quite so loving and connected because the energy that forged it was Venus retrograde. That's a lot of power, right? That if a relationship starts and falls apart and it's connected to having started within a Venus retrograde, there might be some astrological reflection or a conversation to be had about that. But as a psychologist, I'm going to be more inclined to think that a relationship that doesn't, take after a certain period of time when the honeymoon wears off, that's much more in action when a relationship doesn't forge well, and then you move on. So careful of taking a concept and turning it into an absolute so that you then have a mistaken view of what something will bring. Better to just be aware that this thing is coming and then be curious about what it's bringing when it's bringing it. Right? So mentioning the exes coming back, this is another thing we'll talk about on Saturday. This is very common, and this is absolutely a thing. I have had this experience in almost every Venus retrograde. It's not as dramatic as, the pop astrologers might tell you. One time it was just a whole bunch of friends calling me after not hearing from them for a little bit of time. And another one, I remember looking at a moment in time that I knew I would hear from a friend I was in a fight with, and lo and behold, ding, ding, ding went the text. The idea that I want you to stay away from, though, is to not see the coming back of an ex as meaning the thing itself. Like, you don't automatically start seeing the ex again just because they come back in a Venus retrograde. More often than not, those moments are about reviewing where your consciousness is now, because the planet that reflects love consciousness is in the below spaces. Don't call it like a magical piece of news that it's like, time to get back together, because you'll know whether it's time to get back together from what your heart speaks, not from what Venus is doing. Tuesday, tomorrow morning, 4:04 a.m. Pacific time, Mercury moves into Virgo. This is very good for us. First of all, Mercury's not going near a retrograde until he gets into Scorpio. All of Mercury's retrogrades are in water signs this year. So we're in the free and clear period with Mercury, where there's no retrograde coming, and so we can trust that things that we are either communicating or planning or speaking into won't be interrupted by an unconscious process. And Mercury loves it here. It's one of the signs that he rules. It's also a sign of exaltation. It's just another way of saying he's happy here. Just think of the mind and Virgo's propensity for precision and organization, right? In Gemini, also ruled by Mercury, we get words like the Scrabble pieces. And in Virgo, we win Scrabble every time. That was a very fun. I just made myself laugh. It's sort of a dad joke, but it actually makes the point that our sort of process, I talk about consciousness and self-investigation and shadow work and integration, and using astrology to guide that, because that's how I use it. That's how I teach it. And so Mercury in Virgo also gets some disposition from Chiron, because Chiron co-rules Virgo. So in a time when any level of personal healing can be supported, and in this case, it's supported by the idea that our minds, our voice, and our perception becomes cleaner, more precise, and therefore more effective. There's less wasted thought. So archetypically, it would be like less anxiety as a shadow of Virgo, where that's very much a shadow of Gemini. In fact, the shadows of Virgo is like perfectionism and, myopic focus that loses the whole picture. So everything has a shadow, and that would certainly be Virgo's. But for the next 2.5 weeks, like September 10th, on September 10th, we're in the dark of the Virgo new moon. That's when Mercury will move into Venus in the dark of that moon, sort of passing the ideas, precision, and organization and healing conversations and thought processes will hand off into the sun and the moon's, gathering in the dark of the moon. And so intentions that we set in that new moon, they'll have something kind of like delicious, because we get these couple of weeks and an eclipse and the opportunity to process eclipse stuff that comes up with a more accuracy and integration capacity. And then, this is not the lunar cycle to have set intentions rather than you're thinking about the future in a Leo way from this, Leo new moon that kicked us off. But it's the South Node eclipse. So we're not thinking about where we're going. We're just in place, being in the I am that I am. And of course, I'll say more about this when we talk about the solar eclipse on Thursday. But in the spirit of the next new moon being like the one where the seeds we plant for the future are like perfectly organized to thrive and be well planted because we've been transformed in this eclipse season, and Mercury moving into Virgo between now and September 10th is going to allow us to make some good progress in how our thinking mind is catching up and integrating with all the stuff we're learning and uncovering. And then we get to put some of that wisdom into next month's new moon. Now, on Wednesday, we have what's called the superior conjunction. That's when Mercury and the Sun get together, when Mercury's not in the retrograde portion of his movement, and the conscious awareness of the Sun and the thinking mechanism of Mercury gather for an alignment moment. This is where I like to talk about like the Sun as our I am that I am, and Mercury is the psychotic one that zips around thinking like that he's all that and the bag of chips, right? The Sun is the thing, and Mercury is simply the one who watches, the one who narrates, the one who spreads the messages everywhere. And because there's a difference between conscious awareness and thinking, and it's like the Sun knows that, but can't communicate that to us. Mercury doesn't know that and communicates to us as if it is the Sun and the I am that I am. And so these moments, especially when Mercury's retrograde, it's very significant. We call that the inferior conjunction. And in fact, Mercury is inside of the space between the Sun and the Earth in the inferior conjunction. And in this one, Mercury's on the other side, right? So we're not in interior territory, right? We're not exploring our insides. We're just out there functioning and moving. But we get this healing, alignment, organized moment of thought and awareness that comes right upon Mercury moving into this sign, joins up with the Sun on Wednesday. So it's a wonderful day to pay attention to the messages that come. Mercury's a trickster archetype, so that's why we like to look at synchronicities and happy accidents and all the surprising ways we get things. It won't be as sort of overt as can be in a Mercury retrograde, but it is a guiding mechanism. And then Thursday night, we're diving into the lunar eclipse full moon that's going to, I know it's going to rock my world from how it's touching my chart directly, but it is quite an eclipse season. So I like the idea that as we enter the week, we have whatever we are experiencing in this moment, Sunday, Monday. Then as we move into Tuesday, our minds get clearer. On Wednesday, ideas of sense of self and mind and perception get organized. And then we just dive into the very, very transformative full moon that hits the following day. The lunar eclipse, that's a full moon in Pisces, is exact at 9:14 p.m. Pacific time on Thursday. That means the further east you are, it happens on your calendar day of like Friday, but, in the wee hours. So let's start with, the sun and the moon as we would with any full moon. And just know that because it's an eclipse, the volume just gets turned up way, way, way more. So when the sun is in Virgo, we are in that organizing preparation a moment. After the high noon of summer, we move into the fall of harvest time. And so Virgo is the passageway between summer and fall where we change really everything about what we're focusing on. We're no longer farming the way that we did, but it's a good analogy to just shift our focus from one sort of sensibility that's very much driven by what we call summer into the time for putting things together for what is ultimately the winter to come. The fact that Mercury and the sun are conjunct, see, in typical times, normal times, I would say this just puts our thinking mind, in such alignment with who we're being that there's just more clarity. And that is accurate. That's a perfectly accurate description. But to me, there's something richer about it that sort of taps into what I was saying earlier about the distinction between the sun as our conscious awareness and Mercury as our, misguided thinker. So having them together is together, right? That's how astrology works, that if we see these two objects, the luminary of the sun and Mercury, as having these different qualities, when they're together in the sky, those qualities are together in us. So remember, it's all reflecting. So in a time when the world is just changing in indescribable ways, and we're in the first eclipse season that's kind of preparing us to serve more powerfully by, in this one, letting go of everything that's shadowy about the Leo archetype of too much or too little of you at the center. Now the sun that's at the center has our thinking mind right there with it at the center of us. That's the integration that leads to knowing who you are, knowing how you serve, and then taking the organized steps to make those things happen. The moon in Pisces tells us that we're dealing with releasing in a very deeply unconscious way. That's the gorgeousness of Virgo Leo, is that this is the spirit-flesh continuum. What I like about the sun in Virgo, then our conscious awareness is aware of the flesh. That's good right now because we all need to be in some gentle relationship with what we're supposed to be doing to keep ourselves sort of joyful and sane at this time. And so Virgo gives us that focus on I'm moving my skeleton through space and I'm making things happen with the machine of my Merkaba. And then to release what needs to let go in order for me to be more that is so potentially deep or unknowable by the conscious mind that it's deeply embedded into places that the Pisces moon opens us up right to. And then with Mercury in opposition to the Pisces moon, that's the added dimension of bringing some conscious thought into Pisces, domain of the unconscious. And that allows me to say that this is a bit of a psychic surgery, as all full moons can be, and eclipses more so. But Virgo Pisces is sort of like a surgical polarity, where the Virgo is the actual surgical experience, and Pisces is what you find out needs to be cut out when they open you up. The square from the sun and the moon to Uranus is what makes this a rock'em sock'em, anything can happen full moon. It's really and truly anything can happen and probably will. The geometry is very tight and exact. The power in geometry is in the application, not the separation, meaning before an angle is exact leading up to it, it's the most powerful that it can be. And then immediately when it wanes, it loses or begins to lose its power. So the moon and the sun at 4 degrees and 53 minutes of Pisces is applying towards the 5 degree 37 minutes where Uranus is in Gemini. Now, if your brain didn't smoke up with that, with those Virgo-like details, I'll put it in a different language. This particular way that the sun and the moon are providing an unconscious release with the help of Uranus's capacity to make miracles and sudden shifts that blow your mind, whether they lift you up or knock you on your ass, because Uranus doesn't, know from what we would call good and bad. Just know that the arc of the power is on the applying side. So it hasn't waned yet. It's building and through the moment of exactness at 9:14. Now, Uranus and Pluto are still forming a trine together. It's looser now because it was exact behind us, and it'll be exact 2 more times in the near future into next year. But they're trining, and really the orb is 1 degree. So that means that the slow change and fast change elements out there are all year long working really well together. So that when Pluto is saying, I'm going all the way down to the foundations to build something new, Uranus is like, sure, got it. Then Pluto says, I'm going to destroy something deeply. Uranus is like, got it. So whether it's a lifting up or a destroying, Uranus will meet the moment to have things occur fast. And Pluto is always the one who's just sort of holding the potential to go below things in the underworld, to have releases go not just where the wound is, but where the attachments of those wounds are in like deeper places in the unconscious. So an inconjunct from the Sun and Mercury and Pluto has us profoundly aware of the shadows or the behaviors or the escapisms or the power struggles. If you're listening to this podcast, I'm talking to you and you know what I'm talking about. Meaning, all of us have some version of where we're still bumping into a shadow dynamic that this full moon may illuminate, and that further allows the capacity of this full moon to transform our experience to have, even more power to do so. Neptune is over in Aries, also at like 3 and change, 3 degrees and 45 minutes of Aries. That means that what's most sort of prominent geometrically isn't so much the trine between Pluto and Uranus. It's the sextile between Pluto and Neptune. So in this full moon, that means power, gravitas, and a sense of transformation is working really well with our creative inspirations, our ideals, and our credos and beliefs. And Neptune is in conjuncting, or I should say being in conjuncted by the Sun and Mercury. So that means that through my language would be like through my practice and connection to my multidimensional identity, and then, can move in a new direction. So your language for this would be anything that relates to what inspires you, what connects you to your creativity or to the idea of oneness with others. Those beliefs and credos, we're also having a sort of track change from the healing awareness that Sun and Mercury have in Virgo. And you put all this together and it's a finger of God. And it's an exact yod because of the moon and the north node of the moon being, splitting it, the whole piece in half. With Pluto and Neptune in the sextile, that's the motor. So the motor of the motorboat is the capacity to change and the beliefs and ideals that drive them. The pointy end is Mercury and the Sun. The south node is there, right? So we're still in the theme of, yes, we're moving forward, but we're also aware of what we're leaving behind. And of course, this being a full moon releasing what's no longer serving is a leave behind lunation. Remember, everything I'm saying about this eclipse season is also sort of being held through the lens of the power of the new moon in Virgo when we get there. So that the awareness that we have now is like saying, we'll go back to that example of like everybody has some little pattern or shadow or escapism or power struggle that we keep bumping into, that this might be the time to finally like get there and not bump, but actually excise it. if you put your mind towards that thing that you want to release that is holding you back, that's coming from your own underworld, that even like the new moon wasn't a time to set intentions, but in the Leo archetype, it was time to bask in the I am that I am of you. This full moon is a psychic surgery, but we want to be aware of the pattern that we're letting go of, because that yod will be like, okay, get clear about that idea now, and then just let the winds of fate carry you through the rest of the lunar cycle and into the next one, and set intentions that will have you in new territory way down the line. My intentions in the next new moon in Virgo will connect to the book that's coming out and the whole focus on dreaming that I'm going to be doing much more of in public. I'm going to need that yod to sort of take care of the part of this new venture that feels very much like my fated journey. Right? I started out after my television show fell apart in 2003, expecting to be the dream guy out in the world, and the world wanted astrology. And now with putting out the Beginner's Guide to Dream Interpretation and wanting to teach that, I'm setting intentions in 2 weeks, trusting that the fated feeling that I have in my body about the certainty of what I'm building will then allow my mind, Sun and Mercury together in the full moon, to stop thinking about anything that doesn't relate to what do I have to do today, to allow that to happen, and then trust the winds of fate will carry you to your desired, adventure. That's my story, and we're all living some version of it. I'm sharing mine because it's sort of overt. But think into your experience and what you've got to let go of in order to sail in the way you want to into the future that is possible. There's a real stabilizing ballast in the middle of this full moon from what Saturn and Jupiter are doing. They are pulling into a trine that'll perfect, looks like the day and a half or so after the full moon, but that trine is building with less than a degree orb. So these are the social planets, and the social planets can only sort of respond to a binary of what happens outside in the world. Structure, expansion. That's it. Now, structure sometimes means we are in lessons and breakdowns and frustrations, because to build structure, you got to pound rock. With Jupiter, you get to sit on the rock at the end of the day and have a beer in the sun. So with them in a trine and in a fire trine, Jupiter has the Leonian fire of big and largesse, ideas. And Saturn in Aries lets us attend to things right away, kind of fast, with a balance between what has to get done and what wants to happen. I had a boss that used to tell me, Michael, you love the interesting, but you got to pay attention to the important. Because it was true. I like the interesting and not the important. And this is a balance between what is interesting and what is important about this moment of release. The last thing I'm going to add about Thursday's eclipse is that Venus is in Libra. And when I say she's all alone, she's at 20 degrees of Libra, so she's not making any real connection to anybody else. If you've listened to me for a while, you know that orbs of influence are not so interesting to me. Venus is loosely trining the North Node and sextiling the South, but not in my astrological universe. In my astrological universe, Venus is hanging out in the sign that allows us to understand that the world we are in is a loving world. Right? We can see it with our eyes and make a judgment, but when our emotional body is in the first sign, in the second half of the zodiac, the top of the chart, that's ironically called the Southern Hemisphere. The bottom of the chart is us and us in our immediate environment. And Libra is the first sign in the public sphere that teaches us Everything's a mirror. So in the first three signs, we learn who we are. The second three signs, we learn how we bump around our immediate environment. And then it's time to go out the front door. And Libra says, when you leave here, everything you see will simply be a reflection of you. Right? And then Scorpio comes next and says, how that happens is we die in order to have life abundantly. So Venus is getting ready to start her shadow, but not till Sunday. So really not till the wave of the eclipse is diminished do we want to start paying attention to what Venus is reflecting in the first half of the cycle. Not first half, really the first third of the cycle where she's covering the territory she's going to backtrack over. So if we anthropomorphize this moment, we can see the goddess of love in a beautiful, shiny, bright mansion is watching the proceedings, not being grabbed by them. So you could say that the eclipse in a way is more mental than emotional. Like imagine talking to Venus on like Friday or Saturday. She's coming in on Saturday and saying, wow, that was amazing. You guys just made so much more space inside your psyche. Pisces animation, Virgo flesh, therefore psyche's part of the animated flesh. We make space, every full moon in an eclipse, we make more space. And then Venus will say, all right, now that there's all this space, nobody move. I'm going to fill it. But I'm going to fill this space with love, but with even more love than you've ever experienced before, because we're going to go in to the cauldron of death and rebirth and then come back to Libra to, sort of reassess and inhabit the way we give and receive love that will result in, months down the line of us being in very different places in our emotional body. But I love the sort of elegance of that Venus is she's set apart. She knows what's happening, but she's not being pummeled by it. And then she means business, and that business starts on Sunday. So, indeed, the retrograde shadow begins on Sunday. So, shadow meaning not quite the thing itself, but the shadow of the thing itself. It's the retrograde shadow because we know that the retrograde is coming. And so this is the shadow of what the retrograde will bring. Astronomically, it just means that Venus is moving through degree points from 22 degrees of Libra into Scorpio at 8 degrees, and then we'll turn around and do the backward journey back to 22, and then a third time appearing to move forward once again. My language is always, anthropomorphizing. It's like Libra is in, love out loud Libra. Venus, is in love out loud Libra. As she moves into Scorpio, it's like, oh, wow, I don't know enough about love to carry my balanced, harmonious love into what might feel like intense and unloving territory. I better go back into Libra from this place in Scorpio so that I can get better at remaining loving in seemingly unloving circumstances. And that change and transformation puts us on the other side of the whole cycle, different in how we give and receive love. The dates are this Sunday, the 30th, through October 2nd. Then the retrograde is 2nd of October through November 13th. And then we turn around and wrap up at the mid-December on December 15th. This is a very healing retrograde. There's an opposition to Chiron as part of it. So we're really going to be facing wounds of the heart, but sextiling both Mars and Jupiter. So there's like a productivity available to shift emotional body patterns and, how you give and receive love in an effective way that puts you in your walk with a confident sense that love is where you are And in fact, a trine to the North Node says not only is love where you are, but love is where you gather, your communities, the people you connect to. And just so that it's powerful and transformative, there'll be a square to Pluto, so that change of transformation, and in conjunction to Uranus and Neptune. So we've got the absolute capacity to begin in a kind of state of balanced lovingness now to being very, very changed by the end of the year and absolutely shifted in a loving, expansive, hopeful, and possible or filled with possibility way. I look at this retrograde and I get excited, not alarmed, like our friend Marcy. Come to the webinar and I'll tell you all about it. Saturday at 11 a.m. Pacific time. And meanwhile, have at it.
Did you know that Michael has a daily astro alert? If you enjoy hearing the weekly astrology, you might like knowing more about each day. When you subscribe for the daily astro alerts, you'll get an in-depth explanation of the day's astrology sent right to your email. Subscriptions are only $10 a month, or you can purchase the yearly subscription at the reduced price of $100. To subscribe, head over to michaellennox.com. All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show. Today we have Mary calling in from New York. Hey Mary, what you dreaming?
Hi, how are you? I'd like to tell you about a dream that I had. It was actually in August of 2020. And I journal my dreams, so I do have the details. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't remember all these details. But I named it my gratitude dream. And it was really impactful, especially with...
I love that you named it. Oh, great.
Yeah, I do name them. I just find it easier to sort of like, that's the feeling I got from the dream, so I always use that.
It's a standard thing I teach. It's one of the ways to sort of solidify and codify a dream into your waking life consciousness.
Yeah, and it really has stuck with me. So when the dream started, I was standing outside, and I call it like a courtyard, and standing before me was this big white stone building that kind of covered almost like three sides of me, like the front and sides of me. I could see huge, deep balconies, and there were like walkways and all of this. It was very beautiful. Like this, it was like an estate. I don't know what this building was. And even though I didn't turn around and look, I knew that behind me was a cliff and the ocean and was behind me. Like you could see like nothing but blue. So I knew where I was, but I don't know where I was, if you know what I mean.
Yep, and, I do.
Okay. So all before me, laying all over in this courtyard, were people, young, old, male, female, all walks of life. And they were all laying there like they were patients, but they were laying on the ground. And I knew that they all had fractures.
Okay.
When I started, I was like turning them carefully, and they had different kind of fractures, but they all had fractures. And as I'm doing that, it's like I'm instructing somebody that I can't see. I'm like, this is how you would turn her this way, and you know what I mean? I was doing nursing care on these people.
But hang on, I want to make sure I'm clear with you. But you couldn't see who you were teaching or overseeing?
No, I could not see who.
That's fascinating.
Like I could only see the people that were injured. I could not see anybody that spoke to me during the dream.
Oh.
And I didn't question it until after the dream. So I'm showing them how to do that. And then I heard a male voice. I didn't see this male, But he said,
Of
don't
course
you want
not,
to?
honey.
Right. Why would I see
Why
who's
would you
talking
see?
to me?
Yeah, exactly.
He said, don't you want to see inside? And I said, yes. So this man is standing to the left of me, even though I can't see him. I know that's where he is. And I somehow knew that that man's voice, he was the person in charge or whoever was in charge of this situation. And there was a male laying on the ground, probably in his 30s. He was awake. He was very calm. He did not seem to be in pain. And as I'm looking at him, and I don't know if you, well, you probably have seen anatomy books where you can
Yes. Oh, yeah.
see, right. So you know how they have them laid out where it's like there's the skin layer, the fat layer, all the way to the bone. Okay. As I'm looking at him and he's laying, I can see his whole leg like it is an anatomy book. I can see all the way to where that fracture was. And it was a distal femur fracture right by the knee. I could see it. And so the man next to me, and what appeared, I don't know where he got this glowing instrument, but it was sort of like right out of the air. And we bent down and he put that instrument inside and then compressed it and held it. And he said, here, hold this. So he had me hold this instrument while it was inside this person. And you can, in my dream, I can really feel like that it's like physically real, right? And the man next to me said, this doesn't bother you at all, does it? And I really thought about my answer because I wanted to be honest because I knew he was important somehow. And I said, no, it does not bother me. I said, it's rather fascinating to be able to see from the inside out. Like and so after that, we stood up and then something caught my attention. And I'm looking out and all of a sudden there's a basket with these like helium balloons, I guess, and it starts floating toward me. And so I said, what is this? As I'm kind of grabbing this basket to pull it down to look inside of it. And I could feel the resistance. It felt like those balloons were really pulling. And when I looked inside, I saw that there were little gifts in there, little thank you cards or little presents or a platter of cookies. And they were all like thank you gifts. And I said, what is this? And then there was a woman, I don't know where she was, but she said, those are gratitude baskets.
Oh, right. The gratitude dream.
We send them out and you'd be surprised what you get back. And I said, well, how do you get it back? And she said, it's yours. It will come back to you. And I said, oh, I want to send this out. So somehow I got this basket with balloons and there was a man across the way who said, send it over here. Like he was, and so I like pushed it toward where that man voice was and it like floated up and went behind me. And I said, oh, I'm sorry. I think I did it wrong. And then that same woman said, it goes where it's supposed to go and it comes back to you because it's yours. And then I woke up.
Oh my. You spit that distal femur out of your mouth like a physician. So can you tell me tell me about that, your knowledge or your...
I worked as a nurse for 30 years.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah. So I was an LPN and I actually worked in, subacute rehab, taking care of patients who come from the hospital to come for physical therapy. Then I was running the admissions department and screening patients. And so I did a lot of medical history and those kind of things. But I had left my job in 2019, just before COVID.
This dream was around then?
It was 2020.
Oh, honey, that's around then. If you left in 19 and you had this dream in 2020, it's a retirement consciousness dream. And you're being given an incredible gift of being aware or being made aware of your gifts that it's funny, when you said admissions, I got a little like excited by that because admissions is where this like shit hits the fan with how a person is going to be cared for or
Yeah.
not. It starts there. And I don't know what kind of a human or woman or nurse you are or were. It certainly feels to me like you were, one of those admissions nurses who made a difference in terms of people and connecting with them. Am I in the right?
Yeah. When you do an intake form, there's questions on the form, and then people tended to just give me like kind of their life history, kind of like,
That's right. And
and that was
the one who's going to do the problematic behavior is the one who's like, I just want to answer the fucking questions on the form. I don't give a shit about your story because that's not important to the healing.
but it is, right?
Of course it is. In fact, it's the healing doesn't this isn't really true because healing is healing. The body is miraculous. But yeah, the soul doesn't heal, unless there's the presence of a deeper thing. And the man standing to your left, that to me smacks of like aspect of self that's a guide that helps you heal or hold healing presence for people that this may be me projecting because I have a guy of enormity that's talking to you right now. It's not a disembodied spirit. I'm not gone from the room, but I'm using a part of me that I don't use in ordinary space. And the left is where we receive things that are coming in from the irrational, from the unconscious, from the other side of the veil. And he's right there. And everything he does is instructive and helpful to you in a very simple way, and you're blind to what needs to be done. Have you heard the phrase, I could do that blind?
Blindfolded,
Right. I can do that blindfolded. I can do that with my eyes closed. I could do that, right? So that to me is the healing. I could heal as long as it's a fracture. Now that tells me that's perfect for the nurse consciousness that spreads love and heals the fractured soul or psyche or nervous system, right? You're not surgically repairing the leg. You're giving love and grace and listening and seeing and caring to help heal that inside of someone who's also being damaged by the healing process. You can't heal a fracture without shoving compression all over it. But I like the fact that you knew they were all fractures. It's like, I got this. I can handle this. And then you get this incredible gift of gratitude.
Right. You know what? I forgot one other thing because everybody had fractures, but as I was going around to these patients, I realized they all had either dementia, mental illness, addictions. Like they had these other issues besides the acute fracture. And I forgot that to me felt important when I was journaling about that.
Do you see how I think you just remembered that because where I was taking you was into that sort of territory, right? So I love the fact that everything they also had was mental, emotional, neurological, brain stuff, right? So that fits the theme I'm saying of you're seeing people with fractures, but it's like what you're really touching is their thoughts, their perceptions, their insights.
Yeah.
And so the dream says, okay, it's mental disorders, but the interpretation says, I've touched people's discomfort and frightened, fear and overwhelm at key moments in their life. And the gratitude that I might not even be aware of is not only is it gifted to you in something you can carry with you and take home in a nice basket, you then find, well, wait, I want to do that. That's to me about, I want to be of service in a way that was as satisfying as that, but it's new. You're retired. It's got to be a new way, right? You even had the dream in a moment when the world sort of shut down for a moment and hadn't quite turned back on again. And you're like, I want to find a way to serve by sharing and giving first, the gratitude and, So, yay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I love this.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for this fabulous dream.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the Daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.